I'm so excited to talk to you today about play and energy work. And for the people who do not know, Chris is one of my coaches, and which is super exciting. He helped me to play more. And
Yeah.
yeah, let's just get into it.
Yeah.
Gamification.
Mm.
I love the topic, and we talked
Hmm.
about it already a little bit before we started. Like, can you explain to us what gamification is and how does someone get into gamification?
Yeah, that's a good question, right? I feel like sometimes when I was as a consultant, I would be like, my 10-year-old self would like not believe this. My 10-year-old self playing Nintendo would not believe this. So I'll say how I got into it, and then it'll make it more apparent what it is. So back in 2009, I read this book called Reality is Broken by Jane McGonigal, who in many ways is like the godmother of gamification. And she basically said in that book that if we could somehow harness, like, not only that in the modern day, but she used this example of like a tribe in ancient history using games to deal with like famine. Like they
Mm.
would have not enough resources to feed the tribe. So in order to keep them from like fighting, they would play games, right? So games are actually like a very useful functioning thing in society. And so she went from there to say, if we could harness the millions or billions of hours that people put into games, what would that mean for our world? Right? Instead of having it be this escapist thing, if you could harness that same energy of play, of many things, right? It's play and achievement and collaboration and all these things that it's included in a game. If you could apply that to life, like what would be possible? And that just like lit my brain up. I was like, oh man, gamification is going to be this huge thing. So I was dabbling with it and experimenting with it for years, thinking about, well, how do I get into it? I wrote a book about how playing World of Warcraft could teach you real life skills. Basically, like analyzing. This book was never published, by the way, but I just spent a lot of time writing it and examining like, because my thought was is when you show up to play a game, it's you're choosing it. So much of our life is not about choice, right?
Mm.
You're choosing it, and then you're playing the game the way you want to play it. Most people don't show up to a game and say, "Am I doing it right?" So it accesses this like internal this intuition, this childlike playful intuition where there's a lot of wisdom, right? But in our society, we think of games as being not serious, right? So you
Yes.
sort of compartmentalize that into the part of yourself that is plays games and stuff, and then you get serious, right? And you go about creating your business or whatever. So that was my thought. I created that book, and then I basically experimented with. I was a life coach that built you a game. So you would come to me and say, "I want to work out
Mm.
more," and I say, "Okay, great. What's your favorite game?" And then you're like, it's Zelda or whatever. And I'm like, okay, so that means you like this kinds of experience because a game is really a container for types of experience. There's horror games, just like movies, right? It's like it gives you some emotional things that you want. And I can talk about what are the components of that in a little bit.
Yeah.
And then I would build a game for you and play it with you. It's a very analog game, so it's like I would like create a spreadsheet and like keep track of your points and text you back and forth and stuff. This was not a sustainable model. I was giving way too much, and so I was like, okay, I can't figure out how to make this valuable enough, or I'm way undervaluing it. I'm underpricing it. So what do I do? Maybe I should do this for businesses, not individuals, was my thought. So I started doing research about gamification for businesses, and I found this company called the Octalysis Group. And this guy named Yukai, who essentially took the baton from Jane McGonigal. Like he took behavioral science and synthesized it into a framework of what's called the eight core drives of human motivation. And I was reading his work and I was like, okay, so instead of doing this myself, why don't I just go learn from the best? So I contacted him and his company and I said, I want to work for you guys. And here's the stuff that I've done. And they said, oh, that's very interesting. And they came on, they brought me on for a trial and then ended up going well. And, I worked for them for 5 years. So what is gamification? I think is in their words, which I think is maybe the best way it's presented, we usually think of gamification as like this surface level, like, oh, you get points or badges for doing
Mm-hmm.
stuff, right? When you use Duolingo, it's highly gamified. But
Mm-hmm.
it, I think the most succinct way to put it is it's taking game-like elements or experiences and transposing them onto something that's not inherently game-like
Yeah.
healthcare, or that's
Mm-hmm.
how they describe gamification. Now, you were saying, I'm not sure if you said earlier, like this feels like play. So how is it not already spiritual? Because there was, as you said in the intro, I had this like spiritual path as well. In the world of gamification consulting, it's all about ROI, right? Return on investment, which in our world of data harvesting,
Mm-hmm.
attention harvesting is like how much attention can you capture, right? So the gamification is a tool that is neutral. It can be used for good, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak, and it can be used to like the most powerful apps that we have, the TikToks, the Facebooks, all of
Mm-hmm.
that is highly gamified. Even if it's not,
Mm-hmm.
there's this distinction between implicit gamification and explicit. So when most people think of gamification, they think it needs to look like a game or have game-like elements like Duolingo in order to quote be gamified. But almost everything we interact with is gamified in some way because it's using behavioral science to essentially capture and I'll use the word exploit people's attention, right? Not necessarily for their own benefit. It depends. Depends on if you're gamifying planting trees, then that's maybe different. I think Duolingo is being a pretty like value neutral thing because you're teaching people languages, which is helping people connect. I guess social media is, well, I'm not going to go down my own personal perspective of these things, but social media allows us to deeply connect with people that we didn't have access before. And at the same time, it creates all of these non-serving outcomes. So
Mm-hmm.
when it becomes spiritual is when you choose it to be. I guess I'll say that. Just like a
Mm-hmm.
game, right? So I'm getting meta here. Anyways,
Okay, yes, yes, yes. You choose for it to be spiritual. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And so that's what I've been working on more recently is essentially merging the idea of a game and your life, which is not a new concept. There was a great book called Busting Loose from the Money Game that I also read the same year I read Reality is Broken, which is very interesting, which talks about like the universe being a hologram and it's all one big cosmic game and that kind of stuff. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then more recently, I did a podcast called Reveal the Game of Life, where we
Mm-hmm.
talked about kind of thinking of life as though it's a game. And the reason why I like that, you probably have you heard this concept, like your life is a game or treat this thing as
Yes.
a game? Okay.
Yes.
So, so I like this idea, but what it misses is what kind of game are you treating it like? You
Yeah.
know, what is the object of the game? What are the rules of the game?
Mm-hmm.
How do you know you win? In my opinion, like I don't love every game. I love games. I play a lot of games, but I don't love every game. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times when people say treat this as a game, what they mean is take my paradigm for what I think is a fun game and put it on your experience. And so what is missing there is examining your own paradigm. Now,
Mm-hmm.
most people without the kind of training that you or I have with the kinds of work that we do, the spiritual work, aren't aware of their own paradigms. So
Yeah.
what I'm doing is using the lens of a game, which is a much more intuitive metaphor, to
Mhm.
examine one's own paradigms and shift them.
Okay. Let me pause here for a second because you
Yeah,
said so much
I
stuff
know.
that is like, okay.
Yeah,
So, first of all, what we can get back to is like
yeah,
making something in game,
yeah,
even though it's often demonized, right? Because there are people addicted to games and
right.
et cetera, is actually a super powerful thing, is what I hear you say. Like
Yeah,
the one who knows how to create a game, maybe from their life or something else, has power in a
yeah,
way.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay. So that is already interesting. Next, um, it really also makes me think of, I think there's some overlap between us with like my
yeah,
world building and your gamification,
yep,
because the world building indeed, as I think about your game and as you said, like the rules that you apply onto it, right? I imagine like you opening this door to another portal and being
hmm,
like, okay, you want to build here now, but what are the rules, right? What are the rules
yeah,
of the universe? Like a science fiction film, right? Are people
yep,
floating? Are they sitting? Are they, and then here these spiritual concepts come into place too, I think, because if I can speak from my perspective, in our
yeah,
current society, a lot is based on kind of we are not all interconnected with one another. And the spiritual
yeah,
concepts are more about we are all connected with one another. So even
yeah,
integrating that little part will change the whole game.
hmm,
Um, yeah, which is really cool. And also, so if we talk about gamification,
yeah,
you said you would apply it on someone's life.
hmm,
How, I'm just thinking like, how would you do that? Like, are there
yeah,
some things that people can start looking differently at life that will
oh
help
yeah,
them gamify it?
definitely. So the first thing that I do, so I did this intuitively, and then it's become more explicit over time. Um, so a game is kind of like, or any kind of experience that you really love, like unabashedly, is essentially a key to understanding like what is your desired experience, right? So a lot of times in like law of attraction or manifesting modalities, there's this idea of like um, create like what do you want, right? And now feel into what it would be like to have that. But then the
Yeah,
challenge people have with that is, but I don't know how it feels. I don't know how it feels to have $1 million because like I can't even access it. All I can do is kind of imagine or pretend or whatever.
yeah,
What I love about a game is it's something you already experience that contains a lot of the desired experiences of your life. So I'll use myself as an example. One of my favorite
yeah.
games I played last year was Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. And what I love
Hmm.
about that game is that it's an open world where you can do anything you want. Like
Hmm.
the game doesn't make you do anything in particular. There's like no, there is a quest, there is structure if you want it. If you're like, I'm confused, I just want the game to tell me what to do, I'm going to go do a thing. But if you don't, if you just want to mess around, if you want to explore the games, like that's fine with us. Like do it, right? And be creative and these kinds of things, right? So um what I also love about it is that no matter what you do, you're always progressing. So it's not a waste of time. You'll go to
Mm.
some corner of the map and you'll find, a weapon, and that weapon's going to make you better at doing the main quest, right? Or you find, a resource and you use that to craft something that also helps you. So they've designed it. A good game, in my opinion, is designed so that everything matters. Nothing feels like it isn't in place, right? Um, so what I've just told you, if you were building a game for me, is okay, great. He wants to be able to do whatever he wants and have it
Okay.
still matter, right?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So
Okay.
basically I would have conversations like this. I would say, "What's your favorite game? Great. Why do you like it?"
Hmm.
"Oh, I like it because of blah 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 blah." "Okay, all right, great. All right. So that means you want to have a game that's like this." And then my knowledge of games, I would then transpose that to like a game genre that they really like. Oh, they like adventure games, like RPGs. They like progression. They like competition. um, they like puzzles. They like, routines where they can feel cozy, like cozy core games. I'm basically saying myself, other than competition piece. And you can drill down even further, and games have a rhythm to them. So like if you
Hmm.
let me just like throw it out to you. What kind of games do you like games? And if so, what your favorite game is?
Um, it's funny because I love play, but I don't actually play a lot of games.
Okay.
I think I look at play maybe a little bit. Wait, let me think. What kind of game do I like? But I did this when I was young with my brother. So maybe it's because of that, but I always really loved Tetris, but not the one where you turn the blocks,
Uh-huh.
but you have to switch them and then make sets.
Mm-hmm.
And it's competitive.
Okay. You like competitive. What do you like about the competition?
I don't know. I think the interaction that starts to exist between you and the other person.
What is it about that
Plus,
interaction that it was so enjoyable?
oh my God, Chris, you're taking me on a path. Um,
Right?
I and now I'm like, can I switch to another game? Um,
You can if you want.
yeah,
There's
because yeah, I
yeah,
think I think there's another game because I feel like this game doesn't have a
yeah.
lot of layers, but there was this bird game that I
Mm-hmm.
played with a friend a while back, and you had to collect birds and
Yeah,
then make like the perfect sanctuary. And what I loved
yeah,
about it was both strategic
yeah.
and intuitive,
Mm.
and it had to do with nature,
Mm-hmm.
and it still had the competition part. I think I just like to win.
Yeah, that's
And I
great.
say that I feel a little bit ashamed for that, but I just
Yeah, yeah,
really like to
yeah.
win. Um, yeah, and I liked that it had something similar to life, where it was both strategic and
Mm-hmm.
intuitive. Because, for
Yeah,
example, if I play chess, my
yeah.
head starts to hurt. I don't like
Mm-hmm.
when there's no any intuitive element in it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So basically you've told me that like if you were to make a game, if you were to gamify your own life, you'd want it to be strategic and intuitive, have to do with nature, have some element where you feel like you're winning, whatever that means, whether that means
Yes.
you need to compete, right? Competition is great if you do it in a serving way. Like these things are
Mm.
not bad. Like I love Ultimate Frisbee. That's a real life game. Um,
Mm.
and what I love about the competition is that it allows me to get better. And if I and
Yes.
also perceive the other people as getting better. Because what one thing I really like with a team game is the team awareness, like seeing other people's progression. So I found a way to be competitive that was depersonalized. Like it wasn't about me whether I won or lost because we all win. Um, if they get better, then that's awesome. If I get better, then that's awesome. So
Mm.
I could see it that way, right?
Mm.
When it comes to gamifying your life, you don't need to make it a game. Making it a game is the thing that I think that people assume they need to do. Instead, it's about taking what you love about that game and then allowing more of that into your life. This is that spiritual piece, right? So the game is
Mm.
like the container or the treasure chest of experiences. And then you pull the experience out and then you say, great, how can I make what I'm doing now more like that? And
Ah.
so for me, like the core components of a game that I love are curiosity, flow, achievement, reflection. Oh, I forgot the first one, agency. I can do whatever I want, and that's fine. I'm not doing anything wrong. Curiosity is the Zoom is like following me.
Yeah.
Um, curiosity. How for me, I love puzzle solving. So it's like, what if this was a puzzle? And if so, what would be the pieces and
Mm.
how do the interactions work? And what can I learn about that, et cetera? Flow is really getting into a state of like present in the moment. Like the challenge is causing me to bring my skills to the moment. And it's that like losing sense of time, right? And then achievement is like I'm always feeling like I'm moving forward. I'm progressing. There is a feeling of progression, regardless of what that is. And then reflection or clarity is like, oh, learning, like synthesizing from what I just did and becoming aware of it. I guess it's really about awareness so that I can play the game better next time.
Mm.
Right. And then that creates that loop. So in consulting, we talk about loops. This is why things are so addictive because they're engineered that there's never a feeling that you're done. Everything leads to another thing, which again, if it's used not in service of you, then you're just like scrolling TikTok for hours and hours. But if it's used in service of you, then you're craving your own spiritual and self development. And then it becomes this
Whoa.
virtuous cycle.
This is so cool. And it also makes me think of actually, if you want to hire someone, you should play a game with them. Because
Exactly.
I remember, like, one of my friends, he's so freaking awesome at playing games with people who do not yet know the game. So, what he really
Oh,
does
great.
is when you do anything with him that he's really good at and you are not so good at yet, he
Mm-hmm.
helps you develop. So he really says like, oh, this is how you're supposed to do it, or he creates like situations where you can practice certain things. So that says actually a lot about him. A
Yeah.
lot. That
Yeah.
reminds me of that. And yeah, and also it reminds me of a little bit my perspective on play, because uh, I think a lot of people see play as, oh, we're going to go outside and throw a ball. For
Mm-hmm.
me, it's really about also questioning reality in a playful way, which is very
Mm-hmm.
triggering to a lot of people when you do that. But
Yeah.
it's also for me really asking like, is that actually true? What happens if I do this, right? What happens if I do that? Um,
Yeah.
so interesting. Okay, so the first step for people
Mm-hmm.
would be, what is one of your favorite games to play? And
Yep.
what are actually the elements in that game that you really
Yeah.
love?
Yep.
Okay, awesome.
Yep.
And
Exactly.
also for a business, right? I imagine this also being applicable to a business.
Mm-hmm. It was
Mhm.
different. It was interesting because the kind of clients that we would interact with in consulting wouldn't always be gamers. So they were coming from like, we're trying to get ROI. We want to increase engagement, right? Sure, gamification is one way to do that, but like I'm not, sometimes they would be gamers and that would be fun to connect with them on that level. But there would
Mhm.
be this like, we're going to just extract these raw motivations out of this experience and then apply them to our users to get them to take action,
Yeah.
right? To me, that takes away the user's agency, right? If you think of them that way. So when I think of this, it's like this is a tool to generate agency.
Yeah. Okay. So how, because here we're getting almost a difference between what we
Yeah.
would say maybe a business that is using gamification
Yeah.
maybe in the old paradigm, and then a
Yeah.
business who's using gamification in a way where, yeah, they trust that it will get them more clients because it's just fun, but at the same time, they want to have the user or the client keep their agency.
Yes.
Um, how can they make sure they do that? Like, how can they make sure they are doing it from the new paradigm and not from the old one?
Yeah, I mean that's really a consciousness question than more than a technical or systems question. Because if you are operating from the perspective of we even the word users is kind of like it's not
Mm.
it's an interesting label because it's something that like drug dealers use. Right? So
Indeed.
right? So it's you're creating the whole paradigm by the way that you talk about it. So
Yeah.
I don't know if that's actually if we're talking about because I said you said in the intro that I guide people to sovereignty. I'm not sure we guide people to sovereignty via treating them as users who we're trying to get to take action. But this is an amazing question because you have to change the whole mindset. So what I think is it's creating an environment that allows their internal wisdom to come out via play. That's like
Mm-hmm.
and invites it, right?
Yeah.
And then allows as much as possible expression of that.
Mm-hmm.
so that they can remember their sovereignty, their genius, etc. That's my perspective on it. If you come from this
Hmm.
perspective of we need to capture people's attention and then we need to convert them into paying users and then keep them in a system for as long as possible, I think it's possible to create serving outcomes because I feel like each person has their own choice and sovereignty in the matter, but you aren't necessarily creating the most fun playground or the most empowering playground to play in if that's
Yeah.
your goal. Now that, like you said, is very triggering or could be very triggering to a business who's just trying to make money because we exist in this system, right? So I think it's hard to say like what is the way, but I would approach it that way. I would say
Mm.
what are we gonna do to maximize user agency here in all ways?
Yeah. Yeah. And that also makes me think of course, what we learn in the Makosi's container
Yeah.
of like detaching from the outcome and like still trusting that that outcome will come, which is on its
Hmm.
own like a whole different paradigm of looking at business. So it's like,
Right.
um, but what I also find funny actually is that play, if you look up the definition of play, it always says that it has no goal.
Yeah.
So it's very paradoxical, don't you think? That
Yeah.
play very often gives you the thing you want, but first you have to detach from it. So play on its
Yes.
own is actually a way to go into that paradigm, I think. What do you think about
Yes.
that?
I totally agree. That's why that's why I'm so into this idea of if we choose if we choose play as being the sort of foundational principle of our reality, then yeah, you immediately leave that paradigm of
Yeah,
there's a
that's what happened
goal,
for
we got to
me.
reach a thing. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Um, Meanwhile, like people on the outside are like, you can't just do that. You're gonna like throw away your
No.
life or burn. Yeah,
Yes.
like you're gonna
You
burn it
cannot
all
just
down.
play.
You can't just play. But here's what happens when you choose play as like a foundational principle. You stop caring about the goals as much because you start giving yourself what you think those goals are going to give you. That's why we play games because we're giving it's like a self form of self care. I started to start seeing it that way because I play a lot of games, and for a long time I was like, I had this whole relationship with it. Like I loved them as a kid, video games specifically, and then I was like, no, this is ruining my life. So then I stopped playing them for a long time. And then when I was a consultant, like I had to play them for work. Like I had to play them to understand them and feel like, okay, what's this experience giving me? Okay, great. How can I translate that experience to this other setting? And now I'm realizing that it's self care. Like it's self care is even a weird way to put it, but it's like self empowerment. It's like
Yes.
remembering and attuning to the frequency of what if life was more like this. Um, and
Mhm.
and one of the questions I asked, so because you haven't said this, but the sort of next step is great. How do we access this paradigm? We use
Yeah.
open questions. One of them is, what if this was a game designed for my enjoyment? So
This
I
life,
loved
you
it.
mean, or
Yeah,
this
what if
business,
whatever
or
exactly, whatever you're doing. What if taking the trash out was a game designed for my enjoyment? What if, interacting
I
with this
love
person,
this.
if this call, if writing this book, whatever you're up to in your life, if you ask yourself that question and then allow openness to see it differently and allow that intuition to come in, then you can start changing the experience of your life like instantly, as opposed
Yeah.
to having to go through all this learning or blah blah blah, right? Like, yeah.
Whoa, this is super powerful. I'm definitely going to use this.
Yeah, do it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, but I'm now also thinking because you said something about like a game that lets people still have agency.
Yeah,
So would you say that an example of that is the Zelda game, or like could you give another example that could
yeah,
give like a clear image of
yeah.
what that would look like?
Yeah, Zelda's a great example because At almost no point in the game is the game telling you what that you must do something. It's saying
Mhm.
like, here's a bunch of stuff to play with, and here's enough instruction to understand how to play with it. Now go. I'd say Minecraft is like that. Interestingly, like the most popular games that exist are like this.
That's
It's an
interesting.
it's an engineering problem, right? It's like only recently we've been able to build games this expansive. Used to, you had to have rules that constricted what the game player could do because it just wasn't possible to build it any other way. But even in an early game, like Nintendo, I would say is probably the people with the best philosophy with this. Because in the early like Super Mario, there was this like revolution in let's just teach you how it works without telling you. So that's really cool because you can learn how it works. Like an enemy's
Okay.
coming at you across the screen, and you're like, what do I do? Let me press a button. Okay, jump. Okay, great. Now I know I can jump. Like the game didn't say, hey, this is what you do. So it's giving that ability of the player to figure it out. And then like, great, what do you, there's a lot of stuff to do. There's multiple ways you can do this. You can jump on the enemy, you can hit the block,
Okay.
you can get a power up, you can do this, right? So it's in whatever arena you were in, even if it's a tiny 8-bit game, there's this sense that you can approach it your way.
Okay. So what I wrote down now is that the sign kind of is there's multiple ways to do this
Yes.
because when I think about now my world building blueprint, for example, or
Yeah.
innovation, because for me, innovation can also really skyrocket when you do give it some rules, right? When you do give it
Yeah.
like a boundary of in
Yeah.
between this, you can do things. And I think that's what you kind of mean of
Yes.
you give some or like Lego, right? You give blocks, but then with these blocks you can do
Yes.
whatever you want to do with it. But you do have the blocks,
Exactly.
and you are
So,
actually
yeah.
making the blocks for people. So you give them personalized blocks, just like me
Yes.
actually, where you're like,
Yes.
these are the blocks, and now go and play.
So I love what you're saying. I want to just like pull it into the philosophy, I guess,
Yes.
is that the limitations of the game are for your enjoyment.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Most of us think of of limitations in our lives as being a bad thing, but in a game you don't think of it that way. In a game you're like,
Hmm.
"Oh, awesome. I have three choices and they're all great. I love that I have these choices." If you played a game and you had infinite choices, you'd be paralyzed probably. So the limitations are there to increase your enjoyment of the game, right? So that means the
Hmm.
parameters around in which the game is played, the rules are there to improve your enjoyment of the game. Like again, to use the Mario example, like you lose health because it means you have to pay more attention, which is more pleasurable than if you had no health and you could just roll through and kill all the enemies. The enemies exist for your
Hmm.
enjoyment, right? This is like really paradigm busting because most people, again, think of obstacles as things that they need to overcome in their life, not as things that bring them greater joy and flow,
Yeah. Whoa.
right?
This is so important for people to know. I'm so happy you're here with me and that
Yeah.
we get to share this with so many
Yes.
people.
Yes.
Okay, one more question,
Yeah.
and then let's slowly round it off. Even though I
Yes.
could literally, I feel like I could talk for 3 hours. Maybe we'll do
Yeah.
that once. I don't know. We'll see.
Indeed.
Um, play. Play
Yeah.
was really hard.
Yeah.
And I think that there is this belief in society of like play is something you do
Hmm.
when you have free time. Play is something
Yeah.
you do whenever. And play can be quite triggering. And also, when, at least in my experience, by not being so connected with my inner child or having to grow up early, play was
Hmm.
super triggering to me, super scary to me, especially as someone who wanted to achieve a lot. I was like, play is not going to get me anywhere. It felt very counterintuitive.
Yeah.
What would you say, like, if somebody's like, okay, I want this, I want to do this for my business, or I want to start
Yeah.
experimenting with this, but play just, oh, it's so triggering for me to play.
Hmm.
What would you tell them?
Well, for someone personally, I would say probably well, I'll give a couple options. One is doing things that used to activate play in you, like sort of automatically.
Mm.
So for me, it's games, right? But others, it might be dance, or it might be drawing, or making art, or even yeah, like there's lots of ways in which to access it. So there's doing an activity that reminds you of play. So you start to bring that awareness of like, what is it? Who is my playful self, right? And remembering that person because they're there. They're just you're telling them to not show up ever. Um, so that's one. Now,
Mm.
if you want to get more, well, another option is to do whatever it is you're doing in a more playful way. So it's again asking that question, what if this was a blank, right? So I say a game designed for my enjoyment because that's the thing that I want life to be. And it's very specific. A game, because I love games, they're interactive, they have all these different aspects of experience, as I've said, designed for my enjoyment. So I didn't have to design it, or at least not who I perceive myself to be,
Mhm.
right? It's like when you go to IKEA, I love IKEA because that is the closest to a business that's like, what if this was a business designed for people's enjoyment? Right. But still
Mm.
is a business, not like Disneyland, where it's like they're showing up for the joy. IKEA still sells a product. And I mean, you could argue that Disney also sells a product, but you get my meaning. People associate Disney with joy, whereas IKEA didn't have to be that way. Um, where was I going with this?
You were at
Yeah,
point two of how can people play more? And
yes. So, oh yeah. So it's designed for my enjoyment. I love going to an experience that I feel is completely designed for my enjoyment. And part of the enjoyment is I didn't have to sit down and figure out how to design it. Right.
mm.
So
Mhm.
that's why I like asking myself that question because it takes the burden off of your mind to now design what's enjoyable about it. Instead, it's to start perceiving it as though it was already designed as enjoyable. Now, that being
Mhm.
said, this isn't the only question that is empowering. And many people, like yourself, maybe games aren't your most intuitive metaphor. So this is kind of an extrapolation upon what I'm saying, but if, for example, dancing is your intuitive metaphor, you could then say to yourself, what if this was a dance? How would I perceive it differently?
Okay.
So it's whatever
Oh,
your
my
playful
imagination
metaphor
is
is.
going wild.
Exactly.
I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, it's like puzzles, right? I love puzzles. So what if this was a puzzle designed for my enjoyment? I like the design for my enjoyment, but we are infinite beings capable of perceiving things in infinite ways. So this is simply a thing to play with and not be like, I need to get it right and all that kind of stuff, right? It's just offering the building blocks and then
Mm.
see if, a more exciting version shows up. Maybe it's more exciting at different times or whatever. So that's how I would start. And then from
Okay.
there, we talk about if it's a person, we talk about the specifics of your life and how can you bring more of that into your life. Like I created a little gamified framework where I was like, how do I activate curiosity in myself? How do I activate flow in myself? And I was asking myself questions and thinking about the specific like mental models that help me get there, right? But each person's going to
Mhm.
be different. So it would be like it could be building that. It could be building like actual gamified external things like giving yourself points if you like that, or being like, I won, like every time you
Stickers. I
win,
want stickers.
stickers, I won stickers, right? You don't know, right? So for a business, then it would be, okay, great. What do we want our users, quote unquote, to experience? And this is something I did in consulting. Like this is not dissimilar to that. What I
Mhm.
would do differently
Mhm.
is I would bring that consciousness piece, which is how is this serving the collective? How is this also guiding people to sovereignty? Because that's the world, that's the collective multiplayer RPG I want to play, is the one where
Yeah.
everyone chooses to be there and everyone's their sovereign self. And we are
Yeah.
all co creating together. But that's not necessary, so to speak. But that's if you wanted to work with me, that's what we would do.
Yeah. Yeah, if you would want to work with me, I would probably do the
Yeah,
same.
yeah, right.
So
Because
the
I
people
mean,
listening to this probably are the same too.
yeah, exactly. Because I love what you're doing so much with the world building, because it's taking these elements and embedding them into the world. Like it's taking this like philosophy or whatever and then externalizing it in all the ways, right?
Mhm.
So, like I don't want to talk about what you do,
Yeah,
but it feels very aligned. Like
yeah,
it's creating a whole new reality without having to take down this reality is really what it is.
yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
Okay, there's one last question that comes up. Now this is really the last one.
Sure.
Okay, let's play a game.
Hmm.
Let's say that uh everyone in the world is playing in a way that creates agency and sovereignty. What do you think the world would look like?
So I've written a bit about this. There's this concept of the new Earth. It would be a whole system paradigm that exists as a reflection of sovereignty for all beings. So, how would that look exactly? I don't know because I'm not an expert in every single area. But I mean, what I think of is like, great. So, to use the IKEA example, what if more of reality was like that? What if paying your
Mm,
taxes was as fun as going to IKEA? And how could that be possible? What
mm,
if yeah, like, and not when I say maximizing agency, there's a piece here that I think is important because all these games that I talk about are games that you pay money into to play for the permission to play. I think of as the ultimate, so to speak, game is one where you are maximizing agency for your life by playing the game. And one way
mm,
that happens is by generating revenue. Now, there's games like Fortnite and Roblox and people that are starting to get at this, but it's like a half measure. It's like you can make money the way that we tell you to make, right? You can
mm,
make games for us and we'll give you a cut. What I
mm,
want is an open an open environment where people can create entire new business models and they don't owe anybody anything. They're just given the building blocks. And because the system is set up for maximizing agency, all people benefit.
mm.
So I don't know exactly how that looks. It's like collective ownership, it might be blockchain. Like there's a lot of elements here that are about sovereignty embedded into the technology. Because right
Mm.
now, all this talk about sovereignty rings hollow when it's still five companies who own the world,
Yeah.
right?
Mm.
So
Yeah.
that's where when you say what is the outcome, that's the outcome is collectively honored world, not even
Wow.
owned, because I think the idea of ownership is old paradigm thinking. Nobody owns.
Mm.
We all share, but nobody owns anything, in my opinion,
Mm.
because we're all part of the earth. We're all one, et cetera. Right. So when you ask me, I have a very specific idea of what that outcome looks like. Other people
Yeah.
might think, oh, the outcome is I own a business that has 500 million users and
Mm.
everybody's stoked when they play the game, but then don't worry about the fact that they're not happy at work. You know, for me, I want it to
Sounds
be in all areas. Yeah.
incredible.
Right. And then there's the piece of integrating with nature, like going back to our
Yeah.
playful ways of being. Like I could literally talk about that question for like hours and hours.
Yeah.
And I will, and I
Well,
do talk about
yeah. Yeah. So where can people hear you talk about this
it.
and
Yes.
work with you? Because oh my God, this is so needed. I want all the incredible people and
Yeah.
companies to go to you, honestly.
Oh, thank you so much. So the place I write the most consistently is Twitter. So I'm at Chris underscore Tomasso. You
Hmm.
probably find it in the show notes,
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
assuming. Um,
Yes.
I have specifically about this question a Substack, which is called Chris's Galaxy Brain, where I talk about what does this new Earth paradigm look like.
Hmm.
And I think that will give I think that's a great article to look at to get a bigger kind of sense of that vision. And then I'm on all various other socials. I kind of lurk on Instagram. I'm building uh, my empire on LinkedIn. Like I'm kind of all over the place. 4-6 Manny Gen, to use human design parlance. So yeah, but I'd say Twitter is like the place. And yeah, just send me a DM. Like I just love connecting with people and helping in whatever way I can their journey towards this collective vision. Like this is what I'm here for. This is what I do
Yeah.
and my purpose, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah, I can really, really feel that. And I'm so excited to see whatever's gonna come out of you working with like I
Yeah.
cannot tell you how I'm excited. I'm super excited. I'm all for this. And
Yeah.
then to give you some some agency,
Yeah.
is there any last thing you would like to say?
No, I think what I want to say is if you're listening to this and you resonate with it, like there's a reason.
Yeah.
Like the world needs quote unquote us to show up as all of us because now is the time to collectively imagine it. I wanted to say, have you read the book Sapiens?
Sapiens. A part of it, like the
Okay.
beginning of it, but then I haven't further read it.
Okay. It's a great book in terms of deconditioning yourself from this paradigm, the old world
Mm,
paradigm, because what essentially the central thesis of that book is that the reason humans were able to evolve and grow into civilization is because of collective storytelling and imagination.
mm,
And that many of the concepts we think are fixed in our lives, like money, nations, and religion, are actually just ideas that we all
yeah.
collectively share and uphold. And so, what I love about that is it gives us permission to say, what new concepts can we collectively share and hold that would lead to this world? It starts in our minds, it starts as our imagination and stories first.
Yeah. Yeah, this
Yeah.
this really reminds me of the moment that I really got like confronted with this was
Yeah.
when I started reading the book Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer, who talks
Mm.
about the origin story that her indigenous people tell.
Yeah.
And how that origin story, when I put it next to like the one of Christianity, I
Hmm.
could literally from that origin story
Hmm.
like go back to how the world is right now, like of go forward
Yeah.
to how the world is right now. It was all based on the beliefs, the values that were already within those origin stories.
Yeah.
And that's like crazy. So you can see how freaking powerful storytelling,
Yes.
games, all of that is. And so amazing. Let's,
No, I have
reclaim
one more
those.
thing to
And
say.
yeah,
Sorry.
it's okay. It's
um,
okay.
on this note of yes, collectively reimagining a new story, I did a facilitation for an amazing company um, recently, and the question of all the leaders there was, "What is this new paradigm?" Right?
Mm,
And it was specifically a company about like saving the rainforest, right? But
hmm
the idea was, okay, great. If we tell people that the rainforest needs saving, does that maximize their agency, right? Essentially, is the
mm,
question. Because in the spiritual world, right, if you think something needs to be fixed, then what you're doing is you're creating it not being fixed. So what do you do? How do you access this paradigm? And so I did an exercise where I said, let's imagine that all the things we are trying to fix never went wrong, that we lived in a world that was always sovereign and connected to nature, and people honored the planet and all and right, but we were still doing stuff. This company still existed. What would we be doing if there was nothing to fix? And that's a question that helps you access this paradigm, is what would you be doing if there was nothing to fix? And there was like all
mm.
kinds of stuff. It was like, oh, we'd be creating art, we'd be connecting with nature, and we'd be this and this and this, right? And my reflection of that was great. So we'd still be doing a lot,
Hmm.
and we would be vibing at this high frequency, and we wouldn't need to create, we wouldn't need to like figure out what the paradigm is, because it would simply emerge from who
Yes.
we were being.
Yes. So that is kind of the world building of that is
Yes.
what the world would look like. This is where we
Yes.
connect. And
Yes.
then just being like, okay, now you're already living in this world in your imagination. So what would you
Yes.
be creating now? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Really
Amazing.
cool. Wow, so powerful. And just imagine how much different their messaging, their videos, their
Exactly.
images, how much more joyful and how much more I assume it will attract people to actually invest in that which they have to bring. Okay,
Yes.
awesome. Okay, let's round it off here. This was an awesome, awesome, awesome conversation. And
Yeah.
who knows, maybe in the future we'll have another one. And thank you, Chris. Thank you for
Yes.
today. And I can't wait to see all your incredible work.
Oh, thank you so much. Same to you. We are collectively building it. So yes,
Yeah, awesome.
we're
Okay,
winning.
bye.
Bye.